Greetings, folks. This is the finished for now version of Model V. Just going to move the mic. That should be better. So this video is going to be about, well, it depends what I title it, but it should be titled something like Extra Stroke Introverting Your Cognitive Process. So I was thinking about the terminology of, if you say something like extroverted thinking, well, that's a slightly deceptive. Well, when was it extroverted? Because when you say it's because you're describing an ongoing process, and this idea of that it was extroverted, so it was extroverted in the past and nothing can be done with it, done about it, and you're using it now. That isn't what's really going on. Somebody is doing two things. They are extroverting their thinking. So, and as two processes which are going on at the same time, then your subjective experience of that, because you are doing it, then you can say, okay, this exists as a sort of an abstract verb. So somebody can say, Ben, does extroverted intuition exist? Well, it's easy to say, well, what I can do is I can subjectively prove that extroverting intuiting exists if you experience that state. If you experience, even that word state, let's call it a dynamic, experience that dynamic of extroverting your intuiting. What I could do is I bring up features of intuiting that Vanderhoop listed, but so here, the whole point in the, and I'm renaming all of the functions on my channel because they don't come up anyway. Even the playlists. So I got a playlist for extroverted intuition, and it doesn't return anyway, even when you search for the playlist. So I thought, all right then, I might as well be pedantic, and I'm going to call it extroverting intuiting. And this is to really drive home that it's a cognitive process, and to really drive home, and I hope you do it as well, is to drive home to people because you might be talking to them about functions that it's, say, to explain introverting thinking, that you really is the intersection of two processes. So it's subjectifying one's thinking. And when you intersect those two processes, you can get a definition of the cognitive process, except if you are discussing instincting. So you don't really get there from intersecting those two concepts, because, so for example, even Dario was written for extroverting instincting. That, so for example, one of the features in his 8 Keys to Self-Leadership would be something like, freely follow your gut instincts. Well, you can't derive that from the from intersecting instincting, and, well, you can't derive it from intersecting sensing and extroverting. You can't. It doesn't naturally follow deductively from those two premises in a synthesis. So really, it's coming from the instinct, And so you can say, and if you understand the artisan temperament, you read a chapter on artisans in Please Understand Me Too, you'll get an idea of the instinct. So we can sort of like extract it by, if we go through some of these principles from Kersey. I remember Dario was mentored by Linda Behrens before they became equal theory partners for like the last 25 years. And then Linda Behrens very much followed David West Kersey. She even spoke at his funeral. And I think her business was originally called the Temperament Research Institute. You know, and she sells booklets on temperament and interaction styles. And interaction styles is based on Kersey's dichotomies. Maybe released them in the 80s. So now, one of the things that started to irk me is that I've put there introverted. When was it introverted? It's like this past tense of so. But if I say, and I'm fed up of changing these templates, the default realm of operation in an introvert is introverting. Well, introverting isn't a realm of operation. So it's hard to do because it's like a little bit metaphorical there, realm of operation. So, but at least I get it in there. Where does it say? Right. Do I actually mention extroverting? Oh no. I'd like to get that on there as a concept. Is introverting? Well, it really shouldn't be on there because we're talking about introversion. Right. Right. Where is it? Maybe it's in the other one. Let's have a look. Moment by moment changes. Right. I want to get it in there somewhere. Right. Maybe it's in the other one. Maybe it's on the extroverting type profile. Right. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data. Right, so I really go to town in explaining it there. Default realm of operation is extroverted. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data such as immediate sensory instinctual data, social customs. Yeah, because it's not just empirical, it's like there's action in the world. And even there with world as possibilities. Now, really, what I should have added to that is like actively seeking possibilities in the world. And so that's slightly annoying. Am I going to have to go back and change that? And then all of those like little skeletal profiles that I've done. So that's annoying. Always these little and I went through and I checked everything. I was always going to make these little changes. Right, the world is possibilities. But again, that would be actively taking that. That would be the assertive subfunction. So I'll let myself off from that one. Again, they're subjectifying. So the introverted factor. Yes, if you would like to send me some of your stimulus money. You know, it would be good for the American economy because you're not going to be using it to bid up prices. Way to benefit this channel. And the extrovert is introverted. Right. Yeah, the Rome is introverted. Right. Okay, I like this. I'll put it there. A real person varies its degree of extrovert and an introverter. Oh, you can see I did the extroverted one afterwards. Right. Right. There's one. If a person thinks about its dilemma, TI will by definition also be involved. Right. Jung on introversion. Yeah, because I will explain this properly in future. And I'm going to actually be using the first full profiles I do will be ENTP and ESFJ, because I'm going to use it to plug my play, because I'm going to put, when I write the profile of Wilma, or when I write the profile of ENTP, I'm going to be showing how they use, say, the assertive, and then give an example of Wilma, and each of one of these will have an example of Wilma, and then the same for ESFJ. So yes, these two profiles differ in this column depending on whether it's an extroverting type or an introverting type. So if I go in a bit there. Oh yeah, so right. What do you think of the font? This font is called Alerter, and it was designed to be as easy to read as possible from a distance. And look at this. A proper L, a proper lowercase L, and the letters sort of wide apart. So this video really is about understanding vertness. Yeah, it's like you would say, like, her thinking was extroverted. Her thinking is extroverted, but it's past tense, you see. Extroverting your thinking. It's past tense, and it sort of like muddies the waters by actually saying. So in this profile, when I get around to doing the NTP, it's going to actually say any, i.e., extroverting, intuiting. And I'm really going to emphasize that. That's how you get towards your definition. And then you can sort of think about, then you can sort of like, one of the frequently one of the issues people have is telling the difference between extroverting instincting and extroverting thinking. Well, they seek different ends. Also, a type such as an extroverted instincting type with subsidiary thinking, the initiator, artisan, ESTP, SETX set, they're going to be using quite a bit of TE every time they are extroverting their thinking, even in the process of. So there's going to be a lot of bleed over, and Dario has written about the tricycle in his, and that's going to be in there. And so what we got here, 96% of subjects had the top 3 functions from the same club. Right. So something this channel did. Here we go. Here's something. I'm going to have to do here. Toot my own horn. It's a bit unseemly. But you know, people who have been following this channel know that I have been saying SITX and stuff for a long time. So here we go. Dr. Dario Nardi, 8-time guest on the Ben Vaserlan YouTube channel, on page 424 in Appendix D of The Magic Diamond, 2020, wrote something which is boiled down thus. ST, SF, NF, and NT function pairs are highly relevant. This means club functions are highly relevant. By the way, Dario, he also wrote, better to state ISTJ is SITX than SITE. I've used SITX since 2015. Now, I didn't put the line in there, but you know that I've used this notation with the X. Now, the reason why I use that notation is that I was sitting on the fence between what I thought and I was sitting on the fence because for Victor, LII is LT. So that would be TINI. And I thought, ooh, a little bit too far. So I thought, okay, TINX. There we go. So that's the origin of it, of that notation. So when you get, so I suggest you get the ebook of Dario's book, The Magic Diamond. It should be slightly cheaper, and there's going to be some extra stuff in Appendix D. Right, what else have we got? Again, understanding this. I've been a bit tired today. Right. Right, let's go through this and see if I need to rephrase anything. I mean, it's enough because I can talk about it. Again, vertness. Understanding vertness or verten. In earlier versions, I called this consciousness. Oh, yeah. It was a bit more Van der Hoopian. Like, I had... what do I have? This was like... something like club functions. It was like nucleus, club functions, counter nucleus, because that's like what was in Van der Hoop. But this idea of the clubs being strong, I mean, that was in Model A. The problem is with Model A is that you've got rows that don't give you anything in terms of an idea. I mean, super ego. Well, if that's like the parental influence in society telling you, like, but people aren't listening to them. The only one that acts like the super ego function is the role function. And I would argue that actually it's if you're actually to fit two functions in that row, the super ego row that actually acts like a super ego, it would be ignoring and role that actually act that way in this sort of like inner voice that gives you this sort of like. So for me, it would be like, so the actual Jung, the actual Freudian idea of the super ego, of the idea of like the values sort of like inculcated from the parents and society, or this sort of other voice in your mind of what you should do. You could say, well, the two closest positions that come to that would be the contrarian alternative and the backseat driver. So, you know, but it wouldn't fit in the model. And again, super id. Well, the id. Well, they're not id. Are I mean, let's have another type. Really? TE really is unconscious? And then you ask the Model A people, oh no, it doesn't really mean unconscious. It means vital or something. So they've never used that as a dichotomy, this mental. So according to Model A, TE is unconscious in tin. So is FE. So is SI. And so is NI. No, that's not right. No, yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, just notice that, yeah. because you've got the equivalent rows would be ego, id, super id, super ego. Also, of note, this wasn't arranged like this on purpose. It's just a sort of a happy coincidence that you can see each member of the quadra within the model G. Some people might like that. Like, there you go. Look, you got your ENTP there, ESFJ and ISFJ. There is no real significance to that. And so this arrangement of this model, it's pretty much based on trying to make things as simple as possible and concentrate on one complicated idea to get across, and that is to get people to understand verting, extroverting, introverting. And the other thing is the strongest function to the weakest function. Now, in me, I think FI is stronger than 7th, but how do we really know? It's hard to judge the strength of FI, isn't it? You'd have to look at the products of FI. I think certain aspects of FI I'm quite good at. But my diplomatic intellect isn't great. Diplomatic intellect being mentoring and mediating. That's something else to think about. If to really see these, this is why Dario's got like a big NLP background and systems theory background, and he like taught complex systems. So in 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, he calls it intuiting rather than intuition. He wants that present participle verb in there so that all of the functions are ings. But I think you really got to emphasize the verb and like double down on it. So you've got extroverting thinking. Now, what this means is that you can say that you can get thinking which is non-verted. And so I can mention that. So logic, reasoning power, the laws of reason, the kind of things that you might get in a sort of logico-mathematical IQ test. Now, if you were like doing those questions, those logico-mathematical questions, and we were assess what kinds of thinking are they assessing, well, certain things in those questions are going to rely on sort of like core principles from solving other problems and sort of like things that have been taught in school and applying those. So you've got a little bit of extroverting thinking going on there. You've also got the subjective thinking. But the actual laws of reason are non-verting in that they're neither empirical nor subjective. So this can help to explain why you can have EF types with really high logico-mathematical intelligence. So there's nothing to stop. So that would be all the EF types would have, in Model A terms, one-dimensional TI. Would be in one of these boxes. Like it would be FE DOMs here and ENFP and ESFP here for TI. And you got to think, okay, how? But you are going to have somebody who resembles an EF type who could be a member of Mensa and be a member of Mensa with that logico-mathematical intelligence. So how does that then jive with TI that week? Well, because it's not the same thing. TI is not the same as reasoning. But TI uses a lot of reasoning. Reason is the ally of TI, because what else has TI got going for it besides its ability to know? If you are, when the person is introverting their thinking and it's got all of this subjective factor, which is not anchored in the world, then how does one prove or convince oneself and others of the TI? Well, it's through the rational elaboration of it to see how it makes sense once it's been explained. And that rational elaboration of the subjective thinking, the introverting thinking, that's reason. And so you've got a little of this TIing that's using reason, the logics of reason, and the logic of reason, using that. So this is why people strong with TI tend to be also strong with the laws of reason. So this is why you get a link between TI and the power of reason. Whereas TE, it's more going towards the facts, and it is what it is, and it doesn't need to be interpreted. So it doesn't need to use as much reason necessarily. Though there can be a lot of reasoning, though TE can use reasoning as well, such as if you're analyzing the data, and then through what are the consequences and repercussions of the data and all of these things. So maybe if you think about a detective going from certain facts and then deducting from those facts, well, you got the power of reason coming in there, and you could sort of say they're extroverting their thinking, but then also, like when it's Sherlock Holmes, I don't want to play the clip. I'll get in trouble if I played the clip. Sherlock Holmes in The Woman in Green. So they moved Sherlock Holmes to the 1940s because they were in the 1940s and it was cheaper to do. Basil Rathbone, really good Sherlock Holmes. Might have been ISTP in real life. He had a mean presence about him, contender artisan. So he sees a woman get out of a car and he goes, interesting. And he notes the fact that she is not wearing any gloves and her handbag doesn't match her outfit. But here's the subjective factor. She must have left under great duress because she's not wearing any gloves. So he makes the assumption that a woman like that of that social status would wear gloves before she's driving. Or, yes, women were allowed to drive in the 1940s. That's the implication of this clip. Then she is carrying this big handbag. It doesn't match her outfit. She must have chosen that to accommodate some bulky object. Even though the handbag isn't that actually big, and when the actual object is taken out. So there's actually got like a little bit of a hypnosis subplot in The Woman in Green. So you can see there with Sherlock Holmes, even though he's starting with these empirical facts, the subjective factor comes in. So this is why Amanda and I think that Sherlock Holmes was ISTP. I'm going to maybe do an event in future as like debating the type of, because Jonathan thinks some kind of NTP for Sherlock Holmes. But you can see there, like, there's definitely subjective thinking going on there with Sherlock Holmes. But if you were to start with the facts, I mean, Jung would say like it's a sequela of the facts, but it's like reasoning forth from those things. Maybe actually detective is a good example of TE with FI. I believe, because you're thinking about motive, means, and opportunity. And okay, what's someone's motive? How could they have done it? Like it's really practical thinking in the world and thinking about someone's motive and all of these kinds of things. But so sometimes these functions can blend into each other, and so that's why with the thinking, it's interesting that we can identify forms of thinking which are non-verting. So, for another one would be object recognition. Neither TE nor TI. But can we think of kinds of feeling which are non-verting? Yeah. Right, so again, I will go through this properly, but this is just to show you what I have for the graphic. So I'll just pause that there if you wish to. Right, yeah, predisposed roles. There, inventor. So this tells you something about defining the functions correctly. I'm not defining the functions in a wacky way. It's consistent with what has gone before, and it's like giving you all of these different angles on something, and it's like, okay, the definitions that Ben uses, not even Ben's definitions, it's the definitions I use. So what do we got here? That would be an example, and this is why learning Kersey is useful. So there, each type's predisposed Kersey role variant, social role, correlates to the first three functions in its model V. In fact, this would be to put this one on, because we are talking about ENTP here. Right. Can I get it bigger? Right, if I read that out, because those are the first three functions. Right. 1, 2, 3. Each type's predisposed Kersey role variant. So in Kersey, and this is something else that people need to understand. So it's like people need to understand, in my opinion, they need to understand, or it would help them if they really understood vertness in Jung, and really understood the difference in Kersey between the type and the role. Because people don't understand that difference, they assume that Kersey was writing in terms of stereotypes. No, he was writing in terms of types and predisposed roles, and a theory of how well they would enact various roles. So, for example, now what he's not consistent enough in the writing to say, now I'm talking about the type, now I'm talking about the role, but you can pick it up if you pay attention. I initially didn't pick it up, that, and really like very carefully pay attention. When is he talking about the type? When is he talking about the role? Each type's predisposed Kersey role variant, social role, correlates to the first three functions in its model V. So, if we look at what ENTP is good at, ideas, subjective thinking, and practical thinking, and then here, three functions which the role of inventor would draw most on. Am I wrong? That draws on those three. Draws on those three. You're extroverting your ideas, you're extroverting your thinking, and introverting your thinking. And so the role of inventor would draw on those three functions. Three functions which the role of inventor would draw most on. Also, in terms of TE, like, what are people going to use this invention for? The NETX has the most potential of the 16 types to excel as an inventor. Right. Now, most of them, but in fairness, when the rubber meets the road, it's like ENTPs make the best inventors, but not all ENTPs are inventors. But we can say that most ENTPs are good debaters. And that's why I changed the role to debater when talking about the benefit ring. If you've got those four types, supervisor, if you think of those four complementary roles, actually I should have written it down as a verb as well. Supervising, debating, performing. educator. Those 4 roles in that benefit room. Then here we go. Second example. Role of counselor draws on NI, FE, and FI, the big 3 in NIFX. So that tells you something about Kersey's predisposed role variants, that he's seen people of this type, of a certain type, enact a role very well. And then it's like, okay, that then goes with Kersey's intellects. And Kersey's intellects usually correspond to these 3 functions in those positions. So again, you've got, so he's got constructing prototypes. And so he would have, so he splits the strategic building intellect into coordinating and constructing. But coordinating, he means coordinating resources towards long-term objectives. So we can say, okay, which functions are at play in coordinating resources towards long-term objectives? So intuition of development, intuiting of development, developmental intuiting, and practical thinking. Those 2 functions are going to very much be involved in that role. So then we can say, hang on a minute, NTJs are going to be very good at like coordinating those big projects and getting the sequence of operations correct to achieve that long-term objective. And so that requires strategic vision. Then for constructing prototypes and theories, you've got NE and TI together. And again, with when it's the actual prototypes and sort of like putting it into practical form, a bit of TE coming in. This has just been a lot of waffle for me today. So I don't really feel like changing this template. What we got here for any thoughts on the Counterclub? Disdained. Oh yeah, there's something there. In terms of like thinking about how this operates. So this would be, and again, this is why I call it post-socionics, because it shows that it's that the effects of socionics in my thinking. So it's after socionics, and there's some ideas that have come from socionics. So that's why I put the post in there. This was a bit like post-feminism to feminism and post-modernism to modernism. So here we go. The function in slot 7 is usually recognized by the type as a weakness that can be worked on, albeit reluctantly. Degree of reluctance varies by type, yes. E.g., FE DOMs keener to work on TE than SE DOMs to work on NE. Why? Because the FE DOM wishes to fit in with the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is a TE atmosphere. It's like, right, we're at work, we're going to get our work hat, get our work heads on, because that's for the good of the group. And so TE DOMs can be pretty good at FE DOMs can be pretty good at TE for that reason, because FE is a sort of a self-effacing function. If you were to imagine the personification of a function, FE would be, oh no, we'll do you rather than me. So it's like do another cognitive process rather than itself. For certain narrow uses, yes, this is the thing. Trying to get the thinking right for this. For certain narrow uses, the merits of this function can be seen by the type, even though it runs counter to the dominant function. But that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. It represents the other side of the mindset of the type. So there's a thing that Dario came up with. Right. And this is from the Magic Diamond, as to which slots can work synergistically. And I think you are looking at, hang on a minute, you should put this for INTP. Right. So the ones that can work synergistically with the dominant. here. Is it? No. It's all of the ones of the same rationality, irrationality. So positions 4, 6, and 7 can all synergize with the dominant. Now, what do we notice here about those positions? So this is a rational type. Well, it is a rational temperament, but you know what I mean. And so, rationality, irrationality. A rational type and the other rational functions become integrated. And that example there with the 7th position might be an example of how it gets extroverted, like how it incorporates the contrarian alternative with the differentiated dominant to prevent excesses of that. And again, the backseat driver can integrate with the first, so it's like the subjective thinking, so it's not colored too much by subjectivity. So again, maybe I'll try and do a bit of this. This might be the 6. That shouldn't be too offensive, that finger. Right. There's a bit of the 6 in there. How do we know? How do we know these functions exist? We're going to go to a little bit of empiricism there. How to integrate the backseat driver. And again, the FE. Okay, how do we F? So it's like they're all, you see these positions, and these are all going to be the same. So for example, if we see ENTP, they'll all be irrational in those positions. There. NE, NI, SI, SE. So they can all be integrated and synergize with the dominance. And that's in Dario's book, The Magic Diamond. It's like twice as long as 8 Keys to Self-Leadership and an easier style. Yeah, then I've added stuff about energy. Oh, I added something in here about the inner, the jewel, and the whether that operates inside the person. Slot 5. Did I write something at the bottom about the suggestible? Right. There. Right. Cognitive that the show the inferior function was almost always in the bottom half of the scores. Oh, that's quite small, isn't it? It should still be readable though. Right, what we got here? Oh, here we go. It's about Van der Hoop integrating inferior FE instruments. Remember, Dario wrote you can synergize it with the dominance. So this is for Van der Hoop. So if you want, it's better than psychological types in certain ways. So, in conscious orientation, so imagine somebody is INTP, psychiatrist, trained by Jung, and has written this book, originally in German in 1937. And so, all those years of thinking about it, and he was INTP. So, this is Van der Hoop himself. Van der Hoop wrote that a polarity, counter nucleus, so this is where I got the Counterclub, counter from. Counter nucleus, i.e. Counterclub, can be integrated into the personality. E.g., now, I think he was talking about FE because he wrote there, look, conventional moral evaluations. So, can be integrated into personality, e.g. TiNx, Van der Hoop's own type. But where there is greater freedom in thought, so this is right, if the inferior was integrated, but the inferior was under control of fixations and complexes, then it's going to cause a problem with interfering unhealthy FE. But INTP is going to be, but where there is greater freedom in thought, we get a morality. And again, he wrote conventional moral evaluations. We get a morality founded on principles and reason, capable of giving fresh insight into life and feeling. The effect of polarity in me gives rise to an interest in feeling and its relation to instincts. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling sphere to itself. I lay more emphasis on the feeling sphere to itself and on the significance of morality. I'm going to check to see if I've got the language right on that, because that seems a bit awkward. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling sphere to itself. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling life as a sphere to itself. Oh no, I've got it wrong. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling life as a sphere to itself. And on the significance of... So that's definitely one I've got to change. Oh, damn it. Damn it. So it's a continual process with these graphics of like finding mistakes and changing things. So we end on a sour note. Oh dear. Right, and I think I've shown that one. I'll pause that so you can see it. These graphics are also available with all these errors in the Model Vaserlan group. Oh yes, being honest and highlighting it that the Kersey intellects for the concrete types. I won't say the instincting types because you might think, oh, is that just the SE and SI DOMs? So for the concrete types, the 8 concrete types, that they cut across it, but there is some complementarity. So for example, if we think about, so here, SF and ST, logistical provider and tactical entertainer. Well, ESFJ is like entertaining their guests, aren't they? They're feeding their guests and entertaining them. So you can say that part is the part of the SF club. Another occupation which is very SF and attracts a lot of these types, nursing. A lot of SFPs and SFJs in nursing. And so you can see ESFP is becoming caring. And you could say that that's part of Jeff's intellect as well, where you've got someone who's got ESFP preferences and they were a single father to an ESTP. So that's not going to be easy. Well, that wasn't easy. And so there you can see that he found himself in that logistical provider role. And so that's coming from the instinct. And he said that it helped him stay on the straight and narrow because he had to look after his son. What he felt he had to. That's the instinct. Right. Right. I'm going to stop now and I'm going to change that thing. So, good news and bad news. Always little changes to make. And so what that means is I've got to export these graphics again. Okay. With a heavy heart, I leave. Changes to make. Just a rambly video.